one of the things I've heard you say multiple times is people would say, wait, Dave became a preacher? Like Dave Mohler? Not that he was bad, but, sawing open shotgun shells, kind of
Miracles
fun.
still happen.
Yeah.
Come on. Who says that? Who says they don't, man?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It was an early morning, and I thought there was a, 80-year-old who had passed away overnight. So I'm going lights and sirens to help. But, then it got upgraded to, okay, well, it's an 8-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And then I came in the door to find an 8-week-old. But the question was posed to me, well, what if your role that day was to hold that little baby girl as she went to see Jesus?
Mm.
And he looks at me and said, have you ever heard anything like that? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
I said, that was amazing. But that's what the peace of Christ does for us. And I was able to witness to him further because of that moment in the ER.
And then one day, I think it was on a Thursday, my supervisor called me and said, hey, Sheriff Evans wants to make sure that you're at the sheriff's office at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning for a pre-production meeting with A&E. And I'm like, for real? Like, this is actually happening?
Welcome to Faith in the Line of Duty, a podcast where real people in uniform share how their faith in Christ has carried them through the toughest moments. I'm Daniel Johnson, husband, father, and currently active duty in the United States Air Force. Each episode, I sit down with military members and first responders to talk about the power of the gospel, the strength of community, and how faith transforms lives, even in the line of duty.
The views expressed in this podcast are those of the host and do not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, or the U.S. government. Now here's your host, Daniel Johnson.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Season 2 of Faith in the Line of Duty. Today I have Dave and Tim Mohler. Dave is Tim's dad. So yeah, we're just excited to be here and just going to have a good conversation. So thanks for coming on, both of you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I usually like to start off with just figuring out people's childhoods. So why don't you tell us how your childhood was, where you grew up?
You're starting with the old guy.
Yeah.
County resident all my life here in Calvert County. Raised in Dares Beach, raised by a single mother with my brothers and sister. Then we moved to the farm and spent my younger days and teenage days working in tobacco fields, as pretty much every other kid did here in the county back in the 60s and 70s. Other than playing with kids around the house on the farm, band was my thing. Track and band. Did 4 years of orchestra and band and stuff like that in high school.
Played in various jazz bands and is a drummer, good drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the funny things when you talk to my dad and people who knew him growing up, one of the things I've heard you say multiple times is people would say, wait, Dave became a preacher? Like Dave Mohler? Not that he was bad, but, sawing open shotgun shells, kind of
Miracles
fun.
still happen.
Yeah.
Come on. Who says that? Who says they don't, man?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your faith journey a little bit. So like, what was your life like before you found Christ? And then, how did you find Christ and how did you get into ministry? Because now you're very involved, being a pastor and doing stuff with Honor the Blue. So yeah, just tell us about that story.
Well, my mother saw to it that we were in church every Sunday. Excuse me. And it was it's not evangelical church, Episcopal church here in the county. And faithfully we were there. But, the gospel wasn't declared and preached like what I would hope it would be in every church. And when I became a teenager, as soon as I could kind of hit the exit doors, I did. And then I met the love of my life in 1970, and she had become a believer just a year before, and she invited me to this evangelical church where the preacher preached the word. And not only that, I can recall the evening he was standing 2 feet from me, looking at me and said, "Young man, what are you doing with your life?" And he really challenged me. So in short order, I said, okay, I think it's time for me to give up and let the Lord direct my steps. So I surrendered, and he, right there with my wife, led me to the Lord, and we were both baptized together, which was really cool. Hadn't been married yet. And was in the military, and really had a strong call into the ministry. And so from there, I had advantage of the GI Bill and went on to college and later seminary, grad school. And from there, pastored, several churches, and including planting 2 churches with my wife. And I received a call in early 2000s asking if I'd be interested in serving as a chaplain for the county, for the sheriff's office. And I knew the sheriff well, and I said, well, let me pray about it. But it didn't take me long to decide that this was an opportunity in a much needed area. And so I took that assignment on, and that was about 25 years ago now. And then MSP came along a few years later, and I've been serving kind of jointly for the last 2.5 decades. And it's a great opportunity, and it's a huge challenge as well.
Yeah, so to back up just a little bit, whenever you were felt called to ministry, did the Lord just speak to you, or did he start to open doors, or what does that look like? And the reason I ask is just because there's a lot of people, that want God to use them,
right.
But they're kind of struggling with, how am I gonna figure this out? So what would you say about that?
Right. Well, it's interesting. We hear the saying, God works in mysterious ways. Even though this church where I was raised was not an evangelical church per se, I can remember standing in that church in the back one day after services. I know the exact place I was standing. I could take you there today. I was looking at the front of the church, and there was a big stained glass window of the Lord's ascension into heaven. And as clear as a bell, I felt the Lord speaking to me, saying, hey, I love you. I'm calling you. And of course, I was about 10 years old. And I can't say that I understood any of that. But years later, I now do understand it. And then when I was in the military, a fellow that influenced my life a lot was named David Wilkerson. He started what is known today as the Teen Challenge Ministry. That has to do with drug addiction, alcoholism, and bringing others to Christ through ministry of those programs. So it's a worldwide program. Has about a 80 to 90% effective rate after 5 years, still clean, which is remarkable. But that's because, as one young fella told me, he said, man, they give me Jesus for breakfast, Jesus for lunch, and Jesus at supper. And it works.
Wow.
He's still changing hearts.
Hmm. And what branch did you serve in?
Navy.
Okay. And how long did you do that?
4 years active duty, 2 years reserve.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. Awesome. And how many kids do you have?
I have three boys. We had a daughter that died when she was just an infant, but 3 strapping boys. Tim's the youngest.
I guess I'll turn it to you. So growing up, what was the one thing that you remember about your childhood? looking back?
And I think some of the earliest memories I have, like if I can think back, two of the earliest memories that I have from when I was young, actually both of them involve Dad. The earliest I can think is sitting on the edge of a goose pit. So we were growing up here in Calvert. We all grew up goose hunting and duck hunting. Plenty of our family deer hunts and turkey, but like birds were our thing in our family. And so we had a goose pit, and I can remember sitting there. It was cold, frost on the ground, and I'm eating a donut, sitting on the edge of the goose pit, and then you could hear the geese coming, and somebody, I think it was Dad, said, "All right, come on, come down." I came down into the goose pit, covered up everything covered up. He's like, "All right," and I had my earmuffs on. The next thing you know, here's the shotguns going off and shells popping everywhere. And I can just remember grabbing one of those shells off the floor and smelling it because it was one of my favorite smells. And then the other one is Dad mentioned planting multiple churches, is pushing in Rubbermaid totes of equipment into a elementary school cafeteria for church, and then listening to Dad preach. So, growing up with a pastor dad, I never really had, I can remember the time of, where I consciously gave my heart to the Lord, but it wasn't for me growing up, outside the church. From the time I can remember, I've been in the church, and it's just kind of been a way of life, which I think I'm very, very thankful for that. But I also think it's different sometimes than people who have lived outside of the church and outside of a relationship with Jesus and then come to it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I had a great mom. I was homeschooled all the way through. So my mom was working nights at the hospital and laboring and delivery, and Dad was counseling and doing church stuff and tag team homeschool. Lots of hunting growing up and riding around and spending time with family. So it was a good childhood for sure.
That sounds like a pretty good childhood.
Yeah.
So did you ever feel like you were under a lot of pressure, being a pastor's kid?
No, not really. I didn't start serving in church until probably I was 13 or 14. I started playing drums and piano at church. I didn't really feel immense pressure. I feel like for the most part, my dad might say something differently. I was wild acting, but kind of stayed in the lane of, for the most part, what was expected. And I had a whole lot of family that we went to church with who, if I started to get out of line, put me right back in. So I don't feel that there was a pressure, so to speak. You being in the military and law enforcement and then a believer, our actions represent everybody else. If when I was a deputy, if I made a stupid decision and colored outside the lines, that's not only going to reflect against me, that's going to reflect the deputies and police officers in Oregon or Florida or Georgia or military police. So I think that was installed in me in a young age, not necessarily about the law enforcement side of it, but hey, your actions, you need to represent Christ in what you do. And I think because that was instilled in me in such a very early age, that has helped me through my life of, hey, you need to act right because it's not just you're representing.
Wow. You got to be proud.
Hey, I tell you what, when the sheriff, previous one and the current one, would say, hey, your boys, one of his favorite sayings was, your boys make me look good. And I said, yeah, their mothers rubbed off all over them. And it is true. It is true. She had a huge influence in their life and in mine. Mm-hmm. And I was quite blessed, as they were. We all were.
Wow. So, Tim, how did you get into law enforcement?
Man, it'd been a dream for since I was a kid. One of my dad's brothers was a state trooper, and his wife was a state trooper. And I remember, again, early memories hanging out at Amal's house is what we called his mom, my grandmother, and them showing up in uniform and in their cars, and I get to go sit out and do all of that, and I thought it was so cool. I was had several different jobs leading up to that, but when I was about 24, 25, I made the decision, along with my brother, who was actually hired a couple years before me. So my next oldest brother was also a deputy, and went in and absolutely loved it, and I miss it every day.
Yeah. So looking back, whenever you first started, what is something that you just did not expect, going into it?
There's a couple things I didn't expect. I'm trying to figure out which way to go here. I think one of the biggest eye-opening things for me is, in law enforcement, you see some things that no human beings ever should have to see, kind of in my opinion.
Right.
I guess what the most surprising thing for me is how well most officers can deal with it on the spot, and you just shove it over into this little box over here and just handle what you need to handle, and then go on thinking that everything's okay, and it doesn't affect you tremendously until it does. And it always does somewhere down that line. I think that was the biggest thing for me. I remember my my very first day on FTO. I went and there was somebody who unfortunately decided to take their own life. And it was, my older brother was there as one of the detectives. And so my older brother took me down to see my first crime scene of that nature. And just remember being there, and I'm like, man, I mean, you can imagine without going into detail what that scene was like. And then walking around, we were looking for notes, looking for things in the house, and then ended up going into his son's room. And it was his son's birthday, we found out, and he left him a note. So he had taken his own life on his son's birthday. And it wasn't the scene that got me, it was that. That's what had gotten me. So I think to summarize it, the thing that I wasn't expecting the most is the small things that would get you. It wouldn't necessarily be the things that you see, but it's things people said and the small things throughout.
So with those scenes that you see, and there's a lot of darkness that law enforcement see, how as Christians can they unpack these things and not just compartmentalize it and move on? So I just open that up for both of you, especially as a chaplain, how do you help people unpack that and be able to process that?
Simply, I think the very first one is presence. It's just being there. If you can help someone know that, hey, you've got a friend's willing just to listen, let you unload or let you leak out, just a little bit. Like Tim said, it doesn't bother you until it does. I can remember a call, this was some years ago, where there was a double fatality. And so we ended up going to two different places. One was a work location for a father, and I'm not sure I don't recall where the other location was. But I remember saying to this guy was an experienced deputy, like probably 15, 20 years on the job. I said, so how you doing with this? How do you handle this? Because, I know how it affects me. So, and he said, well, I just look at him as a thing. And I said, okay. But even having that kind of mindset, it's cumulative. It's going to catch up with you. So for me, trying to instill that when you're ready to talk, if you need a friend, all you got to do is say, hey, got a minute? And so with that, I always would try to be present not only in those traumatic moments, but other times during the week. Just to say, hey, I see him here, I see him there. I know that I could probably talk to him if I need to, call or say, hey, can we have lunch, or hey, you have a minute, or whatever. But having someone that you can speak with is so important, because you can only take so much in. Like a volcano, you can only take so much in before the pressure is going to build up and it's going to come out. It's going to come out in your marriage. It's going to come out the way you treat your kids, the way you treat your wife, the way you do your job or you don't do your job. It's going to come out some kind of way. So it's much better to have somebody to talk to, whether it's a peer, whether it's a chaplain, whether it's someone that you can talk with, rather than bottle that stuff up and wait till the day when you can't handle it anymore.
Yeah. And what would you say would be some common things that people that you've talked to in law enforcement go through that maybe the public never sees?
Just what we have talked about. We drive by a scene of an accident, the deputy or the trooper's waving us by, and we say, oh, sorry about that, keep on going. But if you're a deputy or a trooper that you're the first to arrive on the scene, or you're a group that's there and you actually are looking into the car, or you're dealing with a traumatic injury, or you're dealing with a fatality, well, you're right in the thick of it there. And people just don't realize what law enforcement guys and gals go through. I mean, we're all in the flesh, right? We're all men and women, and we've got our own baggage that we deal with just in life. And then that's compounded by what these guys and gals deal with every day, and sometimes multiple times a day. And that's just, I can be really traumatic and really, well, I'll just leave it at that.
I mean, going back to asking about, how, I don't remember exactly how you phrased the question, but, how do you deal with Christianity and law enforcement and like helping people through things? I think kind of just, there's a famous quote, Dad, I'm sure you can tell me exactly what it is. I'm going to butcher it, but, we have a saying in our family, be Jesus with skin on, right? It's kind of like, go into all the earth and preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
It's, and as you can imagine, I can't, when I was a deputy in uniform, just go out and blatantly start talking about Jesus to people. I mean, I guess I could, but it's generally not the line of discussion that I'm going to gravitate towards. Now, I've had plenty of conversations with people once they've brought things up, but you kind of have to watch what you say, because unfortunately in today's day and age, everything can be taken a different direction if they want it to be taken a different direction. But, I can remember two instances. One, again, back to another time on FTO where there was a notification. A guy was about my age, had died in a car crash, and said, okay, well, you got to go make your notification to the family. And by the way, we're going to pick up the chaplain. And I thought to myself, oh, man. And then, of course, my dad was the chaplain that we were picking up that evening to go make this notification. So not only am I on field training, I have to do my first notification, but now my dad is also going to be there, who has unfortunately done countless notifications and trained people on how to do this. So, I had it was a calm scene. And, at the end of it, the mom was thanking us for coming in to tell her, and, because we went to their home. And, I'm sitting there, brand new cop, like boots are clean, everything. There's not a crease on any of my uniform. And I'm like, okay, I got this. And then as we were leaving, she came, because her son, who had just passed an hour and a half earlier, was my age, and she hugged me. And, you know, in law enforcement, like, hey, don't let people get close to you. And this lady just latched on and hugged me. I mean, a long hug. I don't remember if you remember this, but just a long hug. And just kind of, for me, it was being there and trying to love on people like Jesus would love on people in those tough situations, and kind of just acting it out as best as I could. So that was impactful. And then probably the worst day at the time, I didn't know it was the worst day of my police career, or something that stuck with me the most, but not getting into any of the specifics, but I came in thinking I was going to it was an early morning, and I thought there was a 80-year-old who had passed away overnight. So I'm going lights and sirens to help. But, then it got upgraded to, okay, well, it's an 8-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And then I came in the door to find an 8-week-old.
Oh, wow.
And ended up the little baby girl, whether she had already passed. I mean, we were doing CPR on her for a while. But basically, I carried her out to the ambulance in my arms after me and another trooper were trying to resuscitate her. And, I can remember the ambulance pulling away. I remember kicking my cruiser and just walking down the street because I was trying to hold it together. My supervisor was there, loving on me and being there for me. And when I got back to the office, I had a bunch of, supervisors and people saying, hey, if you need to go home, it's okay. I'm like, no, I got this. I get super sad, but I got this. I'm good. And so, like I said before, just kind of tamping it down. Well, then about 2.5 years later, we're taking I have a daughter. She's 7 now. But we're taking her, we would take the 1-week-old, 2-week-old, 3-week-old, 4-week-old pictures. And on 8-week-old pictures, something just snapped inside of me. And I could see that little baby girl's face on my own daughter. And ended up having to get counseling for it, and a really good friend helped me through some stuff. But, going back to your original question, and the reason why I brought this up is, one of the things that helped me through that and being able to process and not move on from it because it'll always be with me. But the question was posed to me, well, what if your role that day was to hold that little baby girl as she went to see Jesus? And so often there's law enforcement will go to scenes that, like we said before, people shouldn't see, and having to deal with people in the worst day of their lives. And if we can go through and act like Jesus would and care for people, now I'm not saying that you don't do your job, and when you have to do your job, you have to do your job, and you can read into that however you'd like to read into it. But if we can do that and always operate from a place of shining our light as Jesus would in those dark situations, I think that's can make a marked difference on a scene, can make a marked difference on somebody's life, whether they're a believer or not, and then can certainly help us manage the stress and issues of things that that law enforcement deals with.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I think it's also really important, that you did have good supervisors that are actually checking on you, because, at the end of the day, you got to go to the next call. And I know that there's been some situations and some stories that I've heard where, supervisors are like, no, you're going to take some leave, which I think that's also very important. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. So divorce rates in law enforcement, right, are pretty high, just in the first responder community. Obviously there's a lot of stress that goes along with that, but I guess what I'm trying to ask is what does a healthy marriage look like in law enforcement?
Well, I think that having your priorities right, if you're married, Your marriage needs to be a priority. And I still say this. I used to say it a lot, but I used to say if I see a deputy, or not as much a trooper, but certainly a deputy working lots and lots of overtime. Jet skis are nice, boats are nice, fancy shotguns are nice, cabins in the woods are nice, places in Ocean City are nice. But I would say, hey, have you thought about what it's costing you to make that money? And sometimes the conversation can lead to a better conversation. Sometimes it might not go anywhere. But, investing, making it a priority to encourage others to invest in their marriage, to invest in family. That's important. And it's, we were talking about supervisors. It's such a blessing, if you have a supervisor who would say, hey, how's it going? Or occasionally would just maybe sit the guys down in his squad and say, how are you doing personally? How's your marriage? How's your family? Now, unfortunately, we're talking the exception to the rule, and we know that. But to have a guy or a gal, whoever it may be, looking out for you in that way. Or if they notice you're working overtime, lots of overtime, well, that's costing. You're paying for that. You're paying for that in lack of time with your husband or your wife, lack of time with your kids. And years to come, man, that thing is going to grow with interest. And then you're going to be wondering, hey, you got a minute? I'm having some trouble with my teenager. Can you help me? What should I do? Or my wife and I seem to be arguing a lot. And, it's like, well, I wouldn't come right out and say this, at least not initially, but perhaps you invited this conversation we're having by all that overtime or whatever it might be. So I think that is something that's very important, is making the proper investments and being sure that you are prioritizing marriage and family. What would you say, Tim?
No, I'd agree with everything that you shared. And as a we were in our mid 20s when I was in early 30s when I was in with the sheriff's office. And and as we've talked before, there's things that we would see that you don't want to bring that home. And so, it's not me coming home to my wife and being like, hey, babe, guess what? I picked up, a liver off the road today from a crash where somebody was dismembered. Like that's not bring home conversation. So I think it's a natural series of events that can start to occur where us as the law enforcement will just, again, compartmentalize and not bring that up, and you mentioned divorce rates. One of the things that the enemy uses is isolation, right? We've talked about that in the men's ministry at our church and different things, is that the enemy uses isolation, and that there's no difference from that in your marriage as well. And my wife and I had an agreement that she was going to pretend that I was helping little old ladies cross the street when I was going to work, and not any of the other stuff. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but she was always there to talk to if I needed to talk about things. But I think one of the slippery slopes is, compartmentalizing that away from your family and from your spouse and trying to deal with it on your own, because you subconsciously are putting up those barriers between your relationship. And then it's really easy to talk to other people, maybe another, a female deputy or a nurse at the ER or whoever it might be, who's also goes through trauma. And it's easy to have that kind of trauma bonding, right? So I think you got to confront that head on and have an open and honest conversation with your spouse of, hey, what's your comfort level of stuff that you want me to share? Obviously you can leave out some details, but I think the biggest thing would be don't keep everything to yourself as to protect your spouse. because a lot of the times you're not protecting them. You're actually driving a wedge between it when you're keeping things to yourself and not going through that together. Because those marriage vows, for good or bad, you're carrying each other's burdens. And I think that's one way that you can, practically combat that.
And what's one way that you found it useful just to flip that switch whenever you get home?
I don't know. And if somebody knows, let me know if you would. It's challenging. I know guys who would just sit in their car and listen to some music for a little bit before they got in. A lot of times for me, I had the opportunity and fortune to be in a unit that, I started my shift from my driveway and I ended my shift from my driveway. And so you don't really have much decompression time, for people who commute to the city or to their base or wherever it may be. I came in from, okay, is somebody trying to kill me, to walking in the door and, greeting my little girl or my wife who's has had a rough day already. And I'm dealing with, a fatal crash that I just came from. So I think that's really hard. I think, there was definitely times where I said, hey, I just need a couple minutes. I'm just going to take a shower, take the stuff off, take a shower, go outside on my deck for a few minutes. For me, one of the ways I would do it is, I would read my Bible, study some scripture if I was having a equally as rough a day, and just trying to use that as kind of an off switch. But yeah, there's no real easy way to immediately flip that switch because, when you're whole day from the academy and everything, you're programmed to watch everybody and to be on guard 24/7. And then getting home and trying to flip that switch off, it's not always easy. So, that's what kind of worked for me, is just taking 5-10 minutes to myself, listen to some music, read some scripture, hang out. But I don't have any tried and true way. Yeah. None of it works all the time, every time.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. And what would you say would be some other practical things that officers can do as they're going about their day, just to kind of stay connected to the Lord?
Man, I think, you have a lot of time, at least deputies in our area and troopers, we are fortunate to live in a pretty good area. And so there are days where you're going call to call to call to call, right? But there's also times where you have some free time. And I think one of the things, whether you're a police officer or, a person working at Walmart or working for the government, there's, Christ calls us to a relationship. It's not a religion. It's not a set of rules. It's not, hey, I'm going to get up and I'm going to check this box of I read my Bible this morning, or I've done my devotional this morning, and I've dedicated 10 minutes to prayer, right? That's not relationship. So relationship for me is that ongoing conversation, right? And there's going to be some days that you talk to your friend more than others, just the nature of it. But, keeping God at the forefront of your thoughts and in practicing that, whether that's a note in your cruiser that you can stick on your dash or in your visor to where you can see it, just as a reminder, hey, pray. Whether that's listening, to having Christian radio or your favorite playlist on Spotify or something playing in your car throughout the day, just subtle little things like that. And knowing that there's days where you're going to go from call to call to call. You're not going to eat. You're not going to talk to your family if you have a family. You're going to have needed to go to the bathroom for 5 hours and you're holding it because you're going from call to call to call. But through all that, finding the little things, it might be as you're getting out of the car, walking up to a traffic stop, saying, hey, Lord, help me, right? It could be driving in the car and, hey, that same traffic stop where somebody was really not happy with you, hey, Lord, help them. Help them deal with everything that is a result of this encounter, because their day is probably not going to get better after getting stopped by the police. Let's just be realistic, right? But just trying to think of ways to go through your day, keeping the Lord at the forefront, in focus. And I think it's just making a conscious effort in starting out. It might not be easy to take those little times, but as you keep practicing and then keep going, it'll become that muscle memory, and it'll be something that you do. I don't know.
Man, that's great.
Pastor Dad, what would you?
My counsel is if you edit everything but the last 10 minutes, you will make your mark today. Because I'm sitting here going, man, whose kid is he?
Yeah.
That was just outstanding. Just to bridge on a couple of things that Tim shared that may be helpful for someone. I think Tim was, encouraging couples, especially married couples, you talk to one another and be able to share with one another. But then, I think I heard him say, let's set some boundaries, perhaps, on the limit of what I'm going to share and how I'm going to share it. And I think that's good for everyone in law enforcement. I know that it's been good for me. You can only see so many suicides, so many overdoses, so many events that are just incomprehensible before it builds up. One of the things my wife and I did, I always knew whether I was middle of the night, I was driving home, or a trooper or deputy was bringing me home, that she was there. She would be praying while I was out, and then she was willing to say, well, hey, if you feel like talking, that's fine. If you want to wait till tomorrow or the next day, that's fine too. And that's a real comfort to know that there's no pressure to, tell me all the ugly details. None of that for me. I'm thankful for that. But whether it was a day, 2 or 3 days later, when I was ready, I could share. And one of the things, I need to tell this story. This was a cool thing that happened because, as Tim alluded to, making notifications and dealing with on-site events, that can be very traumatic for anybody. And these guys and gals are dealing with this every day. So I'll leave names out, but a few years ago, a trooper and I happened to, for some reason, we ended up making a string of notifications together. And often with MSP, there would be a couple units that we were together, and we went to make these notifications. And I would always, once we got to near the address, I would say, hey, let's pull over here for a minute. And I just like to pray. Pray for the family we're going to share some very sad news with, and pray for us to, be an encouragement there in this devastating moment. And so we would always do that. And I knew one of these troopers had shared with me, well, hey, I don't believe. I guess there's a God, but I don't know, I don't really believe. And I said, okay, well, I'll just pray for both of us then, okay? And so then sometime later, my wife and I think we were in Williamsburg celebrating one of our anniversaries. And I came back and I saw him. And he said, hey, we had this event. I said, yeah, I read the report. And he said, well, I made that notification. I said, okay, how'd you do? He said, well, I just want you to know, before we went into the house, I pulled over and I said to the other trooper, I said, let's pray before we go in there.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. So we just never know how we are influencing others. Tim mentioned earlier, preach the gospel and when necessary, use words. That was something that John Wesley once said. And he was quite an influential preacher back in the 1700s. And we just never know how we're affecting the lives of others. And but that was just a really cool moment for me.
Man.
Yeah.
And you just doing that small act.
Oh, yeah.
Just did. And, wow.
Oh, yeah. You never know how you're influencing someone. I remember a pretty hardcore deputy who was a detective, and he and I were not close at all. He was very standoffish and respectful, but that was it. And then one of his children, he had some boys, and one of them was hurt in an accident, and it was serious. They had to take him up to Children's. And I won't go into all the details, but back to presence, I was able to go up there and just be there for him, for the family. And from that moment on, every time we saw each other in the hallway, I could expect a hug from him. So you just never know. But it's about presence. It's about being there. It's not so much our words. It's our actions, our mannerisms. Can we be an encouragement to someone? And you don't have to be a pastor, a preacher, a chaplain to make a difference in somebody's life. Just to know that you care. Someone, a well-known psychiatrist back in the 50s said, and he didn't profess to be a believer, but he said, I think the whole human race could survive if one person knew that one other person cared about them. Wow. And how true that is.
Wow.
And as believers, we're called to excel in that area, right?
Yeah.
To love one another as he has loved us. Yep.
So how did you feel whenever Tim first got into law enforcement? Were you nervous about it or scared, or how were you feeling about that?
Well, I'll share my feelings rather than his mother's. No, I was okay. I knew that he would excel. He's a friendly, personable fella, an encouraging fella to be around, and I knew he would do well, as his other brother that was in law enforcement. I knew they both would do well. And I can recall, though, one particular night, it was one of the live PD nights, and I don't know where he was going. Might have been somewhere in the ranch club, I'm not sure. But I know that it was drizzling out, and he was on a call, and I don't know if it was a person with a firearm or what it was. I don't recall that. You might, Tim, but anyway, so it's night, and he's flying up or down Route 4, and you can see that speedometer up, cracking 100, and his mom and I were sitting there, and she says, I can't watch this. I can't watch this. And so she's praying just for him to be safe and all. But, I was fine with it. I knew that he would do a good job. And his mom and I committed all of our kids to the Lord at an early age before they were born, and knew that God had a plan and a purpose for each of them, and knew that as, the steps of those who trust in the Lord are ordered by him. So we knew that the Lord had his hand upon him. So that gave us great peace.
Yeah. So let's talk about live PD a little bit. So how did that? How did the sheriff's office get that contract, or how does that work? And then how were you selected for that?
Sure. So I think back in the early 2000s, originally there was a show called Speeders that was out. It was kind of like, riding the coattails of cops. And this production company somehow had selected the Calvert County Sheriff's Office to come and tape at. And so they did that. They had a couple episodes there. Well, then some of the same folks were involved with A&E with live PD, and said, so I understand that, hey, well, let's reach out to the Calvert County Sheriff's Office. We went there before. They were pretty cool to work with, and we'll go down there and do that. And so they talked to the sheriff's office, and I actually just was joking with Sheriff Evans, who was the sheriff at the time, a couple weeks ago about this. But they had set up that A&E was coming to do live PD in the county, he says, hey, they're coming. Tim, you're going to be one of the guys. And I'm like, okay, Sheriff, cool. And I go on about my day. And, he was and still is very personable guy and fun to talk to and joke with. So I thought, honestly, he was kind of just joking with me. Well, then, I don't know, like a week later, it's like, hey, they're coming. You're going to be one of my guys. Somebody's going to reach out. I'm, again, thinking to myself, yeah, okay, cool. And walked away thinking, this is never going to happen. Like, they're not coming to Calvert County. Like, this is not happening. And then one day, I think it was on a Thursday, my supervisor called me and said, hey, Sheriff Evans wants to make sure that you're at the sheriff's office at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning for a pre-production meeting with A&E. And I'm like, for real? Like, this is actually happening? And so it unfolded, and they came and had a whole team of people, friends that are people that I call my friends to this day. Outstanding group of people. The camera guys, they were on all the Discovery and A&E shows. Like, they're telling me stories about being in the Bering Sea on Deadliest Catch. And like, they had done Survivor and like, you name it. These are the guys that are shooting this. And so it was a very interesting 8 months for sure.
Was it weird having just a camera in your face, like not knowing what to say at certain times, or did they train you on that, or what does that look like?
Yes, it was strange for sure. I think the worst part about it, as my dad said, driving at night, going to calls, cameras have to have some bit of light. And so they had rigged a couple of cars that we call the production cars. So they were like fleet spares, with cameras and low enough lights that they could get a little bit of glow on our face, but we could still see to do our job. Cause they were just along for the ride at that point. But, there was cameras camera outside of my windshield. And then the camera guy would sit in the passenger seat with a camera on me that whole time. And, I think starting out, it was a little strange. If there had been a sign up sheet and said, go sign up if you want to be on live PD, I would have gone nowhere near it. I don't want my actions judged by every other police officer in the country. Yeah. Like, come on, who would sign up for that? Yeah. So I joke, I was voluntold for it. But I think starting out, sure, there was times where, I said, man, I wish I wouldn't have said that, and just explained something stupidly or whatever. But as it went on, because they were here, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, something like that. And where we would do the Friday and Saturday nights were live, like they were live. Through the week, they would shoot for like the previously in Calvert County stuff. And that portion they could edit and it would go to New York and get edited. So, if I'm on the way to a call and say something stupid, just start over like we would do here if we needed to do edits, and just start re-explaining. So that kind of got muscle memory. But then on the live nights, it was very interesting because they were like, I had a camera guy in the passenger seat, a technical guy to make sure that all the satellite uplink ran through the evening. And then I had a producer, and the producer sat right behind me. And, if we got dispatched to a call, they were coming to us. They were on comms with New York. They say, hey, we're coming to them. The producer who was with me most of the time was a girl, and she would say, hey, they're coming to you in 20 seconds. And then we're driving to the call, and she would slide her hand up, and right on my arm, like in between the door, she would tap me 3, 2, 1. And I know after that, just start talking because we're live. And so that was interesting, trying to, keep the job at the forefront, because this is not, just a training scenario. And while also trying to represent the sheriff's office and explain to people what's happening. So that was interesting. But if you ask anybody who knows me, having trouble talking or not wanting to talk is probably not something that I struggle with. So Just ask my wife. She often asks me to joking to stop talking. But anyhow, yeah, it was a learning experience for sure. But something it was a neat experience.
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
And that that was at the time, and I did not realize this, but at the time, that show was the most widespread, most watched show on cable television, and I didn't know that at the time. So I appreciate your humility, because there's an old saying that it takes a man of strong character to withstand repeated attacks of prosperity. And these guys, it's easy to get puffed up, and then it's easy to lose track of. Instead of keeping my eye on the ball, hey, do I look good? Am I okay? How's my hair? And this kind of stuff, which is very distracting, could be very dangerous for these guys and gals. So, yeah, I think you did all right.
Thanks. One of the really cool things about the show is just the community relation tool that it was. This was at, I guess to start, I'm really bad with dates and timelines, but I guess I'm guessing this was at kind of the peak of the, not that there's not problems with law enforcement in communities today, but like this is that first wave, the peak of that first wave of that kind of anti-police throughout the country, where it was just really kind of not the best time to be the police. And the ability for people to come up and talk to me and JD Denton and Tony Moschetto, the guys who were on there a lot, Troy Holt, some of the other main characters and guys on there more than me. But, you walk in and you see a police officer sitting in Panera, by nature, uniform, gear, it can be intimidating, even if they're a really nice person. Just there can be that barrier there, right? But I think the show really helped break that barrier and gave people the ability to come and use that as kind of an icebreaker to talk. And so from, National Night Out or, community events through there, having people come and talk about the show as common ground, and then being able to see the personality of some of the police officers, like, hey man, we're dealing with this stuff too. We're trying to figure it out as we go. Like, I don't know what to tell you either. I don't have all the answers. It really helped humanize police officers through it, and kind of got a look behind the scenes a little bit of a kind of a day in the life to a degree. But man, I had so many great, encounters with people in the county and outside of the county and over the show, and had a lot of conversations that would have never happened if that hadn't been here.
Did a lot of people recognize you?
Yes. Yeah. It was, we have a fairly small county. But during it, it was quite strange phenomenon to be out at dinner with my wife and kid, and having, dads and moms bring their kids up and like, hey, I know you're eating, but can we grab a picture real quick? Like, that part was cool. Just again, being able to have that bridge with the community, and see kids get excited to see that stuff. It was neat. But yeah, I got recognized a ton, which on the flip side also poses an equal and opposite reaction of, okay, well now my face is plastered on national television, and for somebody who doesn't like the police, well, hey, here's a group of guys that are easily identifiable now. So
yeah, that must have been difficult to battle.
Yeah, thankfully, I mean, we work live in a great county, great communities, and so that wasn't as big of a deal as it could be in other places, but still, definitely was on the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I know I've told you, but when we first moved here to Calvert County, I hadn't met him. I'd been going to church, but he just kept on bugging me, like, you look familiar. And then 3 to 6 months go by, and I'm like, someone mentioned that, and I'm like, it was a light bulb moment. I was like, yep, I remember you. So that's kind of cool. It feels like it was definitely a small world for sure. So I know one time you got to actually be on the show, like in their studio. So how did you get picked for that?
To be honest, I'm not really sure. I don't know how they ended up selecting it. Maybe everybody else was asked before me and they said no. And I was the chump who went up there. But no, got headed up to New York to the studio there right by the UN. And yeah, it was a unique experience. It was a humbling experience being able to sit there with those guys. And, again, like I didn't want the way I was doing things judged by everybody else. Now I'm in the seat to say I agree or things could have been handled differently for people all across the country. So that was a bit heavy. But thankfully all the guys that they picked, they just did a great job from my recollection. So it was a very unique experience.
That's neat to hear. So question for you, Dave. So how would you say that the church can support law enforcement? What are some good ways that they can do that?
I was thinking earlier about the question that you might ask, and I'm thinking, how far do I go? Do I dare to go with that question? I think the church needs to see itself as a river instead of a pond. And I explained that, a pond is a body of water. Some ducks fly over and say, hey, come on down and join us in our pond, or a river that flows. And just think of the river of life. The Lord said, out of me shall flow rivers of living water. And I believe that's what the church needs to be to the community. And that includes, I think, seizing and making the most of every opportunity to encourage others and be a blessing to others. And those that often come up lowest on the pole are law enforcement. I don't know if it's just maybe some folks have the wrong impression about law enforcement. Some folks just don't think about it. The only time you think about a deputy or a trooper or whoever it might be in law enforcement, when you're speeding down the road and you see a car pulled over and you say, oh, yeah, wow, that wasn't me. Let me back off a little bit, But on a more serious note, to be totally honest, I say this as a pastor, and this is my 50th year as a pastor now. So I'm older than I look, or I'm younger than I look. I think the church often misses the opportunity that's right there in front of it within each community to encourage law enforcement, to bless law enforcement. In Romans 13, the Apostle Paul writes about, those that are in positions of authority are placed there by God. Whoa, does that include law enforcement? And wow, that's interesting. Well, I believe it does. And we are to respect and honor. And then if you move into another of Paul's epistles, and 1 Timothy chapter 2, the first five verses, where Paul writes, he says, I urge you, first of all, and he says, I urge you, first of all, to, and he goes on to talk about praying and encouraging those in authority. And I'm thinking, that's interesting. How often does that happen within the local church? How often do we, as part of our corporate worship experience, do we pray for whoever is in the office of the president? Do we pray for our courts and our Congress? Do we pray for our law enforcement? Unfortunately, seldom. Maybe on a special occasion, but very seldom otherwise. And Paul goes on to write in that same passage that God wants all men and women to come to the knowledge of the truth. So I look at that passage as that as we are obedient to pray for those in authority, then that allows God to do his thing, which is to enable others to come to Christ, be it the president, be it the chief justice, be it that deputy that lives down the road from me, whoever it might be. And I just think we miss so many opportunities. And I'll just add this. A lot of times we want to interpret that, well, I'll pray for those I like, or I think they're doing a good job, or, that I agree with, we have the same philosophical, we agree, or they're my, I'm a Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever, and they are what I am. And it's like, well, that's not what I get from Scripture, including the fact that when Paul was writing, who was the emperor of the day but Nero? And Nero was a despot. He was a tyrannical maniac. And yet Paul said, pray for those in authority. Well, he didn't exclude Nero. Nero needed the Lord. And Nero needed people praying for him. And our president needs people praying for him. And our leaders and our deputies and our troopers and Capitol Police and military police and all of those that serve need the church praying for them. But again, unfortunately, too seldom does that happen. And that really, it breaks my heart, but I think even more important, I believe it breaks God's heart that we are not observing and practicing what Paul so clearly teaches us in God's Word.
There was a quote recently. Somebody said, I don't remember exactly who it was, but it was posed, if the doors of the church close today, just pick a church in a community, the doors of the church close, what would anybody in the community know? And if they didn't, then you're not really the church.
Wow.
And I mean, that hits hard. That hits hard. And that's I think a wake-up call, or it should be a wake-up call to the church. God doesn't call us to just, disciple our brothers and cater to the body. And while that's important, I think one of the biggest charges to the disciples was, hey, go out and make disciples. Go out into the community. And I mean, that's one of the ways that Honor the Blue was born, talking about praying and encouraging law enforcement. And, when my dad started Honor the Blue, it was out of that vein. There's law enforcement officers who deal with things. How good does it feel, no matter how cold and hard you are, when somebody recognizes you for something, or somebody cares for you, or when you out of the blue get a thank you note or a birthday card, if somebody remembers your birthday. And so one of the ways that we're trying to impact the community in our county, and then hopefully we can grow this to neighboring counties in the state, and we'll see how far the Lord wants to take it, right? But, we want to encourage and support the people that protect us and lay their lives down for us on a daily basis. And we do that from birthday cards. So deputies and troopers on their birthday, they'll get a gift card and a handwritten note from Honor the Blue. That goes through our dispatchers as well, and our jail staff at the detention center, our correctional deputies. We have counseling available. My dad will, he mentioned doing marriage counseling and working with troopers and deputies and offering counseling for them. And so we're hoping to grow this to where we can offer, mental health counseling and grow and to serve in different ways. One of the practical ways is we gave recently, and Dad, you should share about the guardian angels, supported the community, the law enforcement community with some devices to help keep them safe. I mean, why don't you?
and I will address that. But at 73, I want to be sure I address this other thing before the synapse is broken and it's gone. And, you were mentioning earlier about the church we need to be reaching out and loving others. And if we closed our doors, what difference would it make in the community? And then made me think of John 13:34 and 35, where we're told to love one another as Christ loves us. Okay, wow. That's a mouthful. But then it goes on to say, the world will know that you are my disciples by how you love one another. So I kind of like to turn that on its head. Okay, well, if we're not loving one another, we're not loving others, what message are we sending to the rest of the world? And that's not a message we want to be sending. But too often that's the message we are sending, is that, yeah, we'll care if you're one of us, you come amongst us, but otherwise, you're on your own. And I'm going to say one more thing before we get into the guardian angels. I can't tell you how many homes that I've been in, but well over 100 more, where I'll say to parents or a grieving wife or husband that's in shock, hey, can I call? Is there a pastor or a priest or rabbi, someone that I can call for you that just could come here for a few minutes and sit with you? Because, I'm with deputies and troopers, and after a given period of time, they need to go back out and get back to work. And so often the answer is no, we don't have a church. We don't. And I'm thinking how sad this is now. So I'll say, well, what about neighbors or friends? Well, no, we really don't have it. I'm going, how could this be? How could this be? We're all going to leave here in 10 or 15 minutes, and we're going to leave you here grieving, the two of you. This just isn't right. This isn't right. But so often I have found that's the way it is, that folks just aren't part of the church. And I'm not blaming that on the church. I'm just saying, it works both ways. We've got to be willing, but the church has also got to be obedient and be willing to reach out into communities and reach out to law enforcement. So as far as guardian angels, I was really glad that we could do this. It was a significant investment for us. And just to familiarize, I'm sure you're familiar with what that device is, but it's just a small LED device that goes on a vest, and it's visible for miles in the day, or especially at night. And it blinks white, red, blue. You could set it to different things. And for a deputy to get out of his cruiser or her cruiser, be on the side of the road, to have that thing on their vest that shines, so a car is coming a mile away, they see that thing blinking, and maybe you're not standing beside your cruiser at the moment, but they still see you because they see that LED blinking. So it was a no-brainer for us to do this. So it was, I don't know, I suppose we've invested $10,000 maybe in purchasing those. But, for the most part, deputies have them on. And if they don't, I'll say, where's your guardian angel, man? Go get that thing out of your cruiser and put it on. Because it just might be the means for you to get back home to your wife and family, or your husband and family this day. So we were exceptionally blessed to be able to do that. And we still keep up with all the new graduates. Haven't been able to talk state police into doing that yet, and I don't see that coming. But thankfully for our local deputies, we've been able to pull that off.
Yeah, and one good thing about that device too is your equipment can fail in your cruiser. So if your backlight's just cut off, that could be the only thing that they see.
Yeah.
And with so many people on their phones and everything, I just think that's really neat that you were able to do that. And I think that's great about the nonprofits, right? It's like you're providing things that people actually
need. We should. Tim's brother, and to back up just a little bit, this is how This was my introduction. Tim's brother had not retired yet, and he was backing up a female deputy. And he stepped out of his cruiser, and this was on Route 4, and a guy or a gal, I don't know who, came flying by him as if he didn't even see him. And Andrew had to back up against the cruiser. He didn't want to get hit. And I'm thinking, he mentioned something about one of his buds had something called a guardian angel. So we had the conversation. As soon as he was done, I called that deputy. I said, Yuri, tell me about the guardian angel. Yuri told me about it. And then I investigated myself, hooked up with a local company called, I believe it's Safeware. I'd like to give them a plug because they really blessed us, enabled us to afford these devices. And from there, it was just, we took the steps, talked with the command staff at the sheriff's office, and they had already been considering getting those for deputies, but didn't have the funds for it. I said, well, now we've got the funds, so we'll get them. And then I'll be sure that I show up every meeting, early evenings and mornings until every deputy has one. And so we handed out, I don't know, in excess of 100 and some of them, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you guys for, starting that, because I know it's doing a lot of good things. I went to a golf tournament the other day. But yeah, and I just appreciate you guys doing that and just having the hearts to serve. That's just it. Yeah, it's definitely very motivating. And yeah, I appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
And I have to do a shameless or not so shameless plug of, we're always looking for community partners. You can find out more information about it at honortheblue.us. And we're looking for partners and folks who want to pour that care out into the law enforcement community. Guardian angels cost money, birthday cards and gift cards and supporting events. It takes resources to make that happen. As much as I could just wish we could just, give all the care in the world, that'd be great, but we have to be able to have the resources to do it. I'm not saying that, hey, give money, right? You can give time. You can find ways to partner in other ways with us. If you want to give back to the community, to the folks who, like we said before, are willing to not ever go back home to see their kids again so that you can see yours, reach out and let's partner, figure out ways we can give back.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So looking back, as your time as a chaplain, what would you say is the most memorable moment for you?
I think those times when you realize you've made a difference, when you realize you've helped someone through a very traumatic time, and that trauma could come through many, many different avenues. It may be a traumatic event, or it might be a marriage that was on the rocks and you helped a couple put it back together again. What a blessing. What a huge, that's one of those, wow, Lord, if I never did had any other opportunity, this is one of them. Mm-hmm. Or, those moments. I can remember being in the ER once where there was a really sad event where it was a head-on collision up on Plum Point Road. It was on a turn, and it was two ladies. One crossed the center line on this turn. One was an elderly lady. One was a young wife, and they were both killed on the spot. Being in the ER and having shared with one, with the husband of one, and then being in the ER waiting for the other husband to get there, and then when he got there, and you just never know how a person's going to react. And you just got to be there, and you just got to hopefully that you're exuding some empathy for a person, and because your words don't matter at that point, not then. And trying to comfort this husband and praying with him. And then I remember being in the bay with his deceased love of his heart, laying there on the stretcher. And there were several deputies and one couple of command staff. And I said, well, do you mind if I pray? Because I usually will ask an individual, do you mind if I pray? I'm a believer. May I pray? Are you comfortable with that? Oh, sure. Most of the time people say sure. So I prayed, words of comfort, put on my pastoral mantle and prayed. And I thought, I prayed a comforting prayer, I hope, Lord. And next thing I know, the husband says, well, I'd like to pray. And he starts praying. And he prays for everybody standing in that room.
Wow.
And he says, Lord, I just pray that I just pray if there's anyone standing here that doesn't know the peace that only you can give. I pray, Lord Jesus, that they would just turn their hearts to you.
Wow.
Just like the peace that I have and the peace that my wife had and the peace that I know she's with you right now, celebrating her life forever with you. And I'm just like blown away that here this grieving husband could make that prayer. And boy, what a teaching moment it was for me. And then riding home with this same supervisory deputy that years ago we had been on so many calls, and he looks at me and said, have you ever heard anything like that? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
I said, that was amazing. But that's what the peace of Christ does for us. And I was able to witness to him further because of that moment in the ER. So, man, Paul says, make the most of every opportunity in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 17 and 18. Make the most of every opportunity because the days are short. And the word opportunity there is really means it's a moment in time of short duration. It means that you may not ever have another opportunity like this. So don't let it slip through your fingers. So that husband didn't, and I tried not to. And boy, just think what it would be like for law enforcement and for the rest of the world if we as professing believers and we who are of the body of Christ, the church, of the local church, if we said that every day during every worship service, let's not let this moment slip through our hands. Let's be a blessing to all those, especially those who serve in law enforcement and those who lead.
Man, thank you for sharing that. I mean,
Yeah.
especially for him to do that just so soon after is just
Amazing.
only
Absolutely
God
amazing.
Can do that.
And following up with him afterwards, having breakfast with him in time in weeks, months to come. I know he was grieving, and I know what it's like to, say goodbye to your life partner. But amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Wow, praise God. What about for you? Looking back, what would you say would be your most memorable moment?
It's very easy for me. I had made a stop one evening, and there was a young lady that was about my age. Long story short, good job, well put together. Had, like so many others before her, was prescribed prescription medication for some surgery and complications. Through a series of events, got hooked on those, was introduced to heroin and fentanyl from there, and then was hiding this addiction, kind of not hiding this addiction. And for a long time, had ended up having a family member said, "Hey, we don't know what's going on, but your kids aren't staying with you right now." And she ended up getting arrested that evening. And during an interview, we were talking, and I don't claim any of this being me. This was all the Lord. So this is not, hey, look what I did. This is hey, look what the Lord did. And after the interview, we were waiting for a transport for her because she was charged, and not everybody who gets arrested goes to jail. Sometimes you can be charged, and there's a series of events. So we're waiting for the ride to pick her up that evening, and instead of just putting her in a holding cell, it was late at night. I sat in the interview room and we just talked. And through chatting with her, I remember sitting there and just seeing this girl, and she was just broken, and she didn't want to admit that she had an issue. She's like, yeah, I just sometimes kind of mess with it, but it was the mindset of, I'm fine. I just like to have this every now and then, to her breaking down, admitting that she was an addict, and that is the reason why she didn't have her kids. It wasn't other people's fault. It was hers that she didn't have her kids. And I just remember sitting there praying, like, Lord, just let me say the right things. Like, I am not qualified to handle this portion of this conversation. Help me say the right things. Well, she asked me to stand with her when she got picked up to tell somebody that she had an addiction. And so I stood with her while she told, I don't remember exactly who it was, a family member, I believe, like, hey, I'm a heroin addict. Like, I need help. Like, for real. And just the look on their face was like, are you kidding me right now? So they leave for the evening, and being, cynical law enforcement and seeing people who say, I'm going to get help and do everything. I left thinking, man, well, I hope she gets help, but I'm never going to see her again. Like, she's probably going to keep on going. That's the cynicism, unfortunately, that comes a lot of time with law enforcement, because you see it over and over and again of people just keep going back to it. So I don't know, 30, 40 days later, I get an email, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, this name sounds familiar, but I couldn't picture it. It's like, this name sounds familiar. And it started, hey, Deputy Mohler, I don't know if you remember me, but this night was really important for me, and I just want you to know that I went to rehab the next day, and I'm 30 days clean. And if you hadn't told me or encouraged me to tell my family, I would have never done it, and I'd have probably would have died. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, man, that's really cool. That's the coolest email I've ever received. So I responded to her, and I was like, congratulations, keep it up. Again, cynicism. I'm never going to hear from this person again. 90 days, I get an email. 6 months, I get an email. And then I believe it was the year clean email I got. She had her girls back with her.
Wow. That's incredible.
And just to be able to, again, whatever I said, I don't remember what I said to her that night. I mean, there was, definitely the Lord's work again, not mine, the Lord's work. But being able to see that, and man, that's one of the reasons I got into law enforcement, was being able to help people. And that of seeing a family restored and somebody overcoming something, that was by far the most impactful moment of my career, for sure.
Yeah, that gives you the fuel to keep going. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, it was really cool.
And I will abridge on that, because that's such an important story. Not only to encourage the three of us, to encourage everyone that's listening to us now, as I hope this will be, sitting in a cell over in Charles County with a young lady that had been arrested for drug possession, drug use. I think it was cocaine. And we had visited a couple of times, and I was back visiting with her again. And through conversations and through open opportunities, she was listening. being encouraged, or at least I hoped I was encouraging her, and then I was sharing that Christ is willing to change our hearts if we're willing to just yield to him and be changed. And I can remember it was, I think it was the day before Christmas Eve. It was a few years back now. And sitting there in that cell, she said, I'm ready. I'm ready for the change. She gave her heart to the Lord right there.
Wow.
And then, and this is what I hope is an encouragement to anybody that's dealing with marriage on the rocks, that's dealing with difficulty in life, that's dealing with difficulty on the job. It's just life is stressing you out. She looked at me and she said, and Pastor Dave, I know I never have to live this way anymore. I never have to be this way again. And from that moment on, she's been clean. She's got a family. She had children, raised those children, and she's following the Lord to this day. So again, that's not me. That's not Tim. That's the power of Christ to change a heart, to change a life, if we're just willing to humble ourselves and say, Lord, as broken as I am, here I am. Do what you can with me, with my marriage, with my family, with my life. Amen. And he's faithful.
And I want to tag on to that for law enforcement, and especially, law enforcement officers that are Christians. Be strategically placed. Think of it that way, or not be strategically placed. You are strategically placed, right? So that, like me sitting with her in that interview room, or, you on a crash scene, or you stopping somebody for speeding during a DUI arrest, during a domestic, during a citizen encounter, you are strategically placed. Your words and actions in that time, every time, you don't have to specifically talk about Jesus, but you can show, like we talked about before, you can show Jesus through those situations, whether it's a horrible situation or a good situation. And like my dad said, Lord, help me in my marriage and help me through this. I mean, pray, Lord, help me shine my light. Use me in these situations as only you can, help me get out of your way, and take me out of this situation, and trying to look at it as that mindset. I've had the fortune to be in some, hurt a couple times in ERs and hospitals, and not knowing why that I'm going through this, right? And, no matter what you're going through, the Lord can use you. He is all knowing, he is all powerful, and we are nothing, and if we have that mindset of being placed by God into every situation that we are in, that can have a marked impact, not only on our life and our walk, but in the lives of the people around us. Now, some of those situations you're in because you're a moron and you made a bad choice. I'm not saying that your stupidity and choice was, orchestrated by God. That's the whole free will thing, right?
Right.
But God already knows what stupid decisions you're going to make, right? That doesn't prohibit you from being placed and shining his light, even in those situations. And so that's the challenge that I have, is find a way, whether subtly or overtly, through all of those situations to shine your light, because that's what we're called to do. I mean, going back to the nursery rhyme, don't hide your light under a bushel, right?
Right. You'll friend of mine, fellow pastor, we would say this frequently, and I trust that he still does. You'll never meet a person on this green earth, God's green earth, that Christ did not die for. So whether it's a perpetrator, where it's one that created or caused this horrendous thing to happen, well, you did make a very foolish choice. But you know what? God still cares about you. God can redeem your life. There may be a penalty to pay on this earth, but God can redeem your life and change you from the inside out if you're willing. And just a bridge onto something else Tim said about God, give me the words to speak. And sometimes the words might be few, because we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? That should say something to us right there. And often we don't get that. And we pastors and preachers often don't get that. But, God, give me the words to speak. And I'll just, in this segment with, there's a saying that says some people speak because they have because they have to say something. Others speak because they have something to say. Lord, make me the person that has something to say, not just someone who's filling the void with words, as if that really makes a difference.
Right.
Because often it doesn't.
Wow, that's good. So can you speak a little bit about your transition out of being in law enforcement?
Sure. So I, like I said, I had always wanted to be in law enforcement, and had a great career. I loved my job. Really enjoyed the people I worked with, and for the sheriff's office. 2017, I guess, is when all my fun started. I got rear-ended on Route 4, flown out from that. About highway speed, I think somewhere in 50, 55 miles an hour, they hit me. Got flown out from that with some back and neck and arm issues. I think I was out for, 2 months maybe from that, and came back. And then in 2019, I was rear-ended again. I believe it was 73 miles an hour. I was sitting at a stoplight. It was early morning. Some of my coworkers said I was in and out of consciousness. I don't remember anything. I remember the impact, and then thinking, "Oh man, here we go. It's lights out time," and passing out. Then I woke up in the trauma center. I think 90 minutes later. I was in and out there, but as a result of that one, I was out for about 13 months. I had to have a spinal fusion. Attributed that to the grace of God, that I was not dead. The impact, so some folks have said, should have scrambled my brain, because I was hit from about, like I said, 73 miles an hour from behind, and then I hit the car in front of me at 35 miles an hour.
Wow.
So just the quick back and forth should have scrambled the brain, and if you ask some people, it probably did. But by the grace of God, I lived, and I was didn't want to hang up the hat. So after my fusion, I went back to work for about another year, and then my body I couldn't take it. I remember the day that kind of solidified it. There was like a little tiny hatchback car, like that was stopped on a flat portion of a road, and me and my buddy went to, just push it out of the way, like it had stalled, and it was a very light car. I felt like I didn't even put any effort into it, and like I could barely walk for 2 days afterwards because everything was just jacked up. And it was like, man, I have a family. As much as I love this, I need to hang this up. So, I was praying about opportunities and if I should leave the sheriff's office or not. And the Lord just opened doors, or opened a door for me in a supernatural, only the way the Lord could do it way, to a career field that I had a lot of experience in already, and able to do that. And now I get to work with a lot of churches and different organizations from my day job now. But leaving law enforcement, I mean, you're in it, and for those listening, like it's in you, it's part of you, and it's always going to be there. And I can remember, this was, 8 months after I left. We had a deputy in our county that had unfortunately been shot. And like text messages start coming in on my phone from people. And I was halfway down my stairs to go get in my uniform and go before I realized that I wasn't the police anymore. And it was just that kind of just, hey, I don't know what I need to do, but I'm just going to go help. I'll cover the road. I'll do whatever, and I think it's there. And that goes back to the calling, it's, if you look at it logistically in a pros and cons list, if somebody should go into law enforcement, it's the overwhelmingly just no, don't do it.
Right.
Don't do it. Like, you're a moron if you do it. But still, time and time again, people raise that hand and take that oath to go and protect. And I think it's just part of the nature of folks. And then today, especially, things aren't the most stable with regards to the police and citizen encounters, and everybody from, everybody has opinions are, strong and prevalent today as they were before. And, it's a challenging job, but something that I do believe that you're called for and that God has created people to do. And I miss it. But I'm incredibly thankful for the people who continue to step out there each and every day to protect me and my family.
What was it like receiving that phone call that he had been in that accident?
Well, the first one, it was like, oh my goodness, this happens to other people. This doesn't happen to us, And but then it was just like you just jump into the mode, and you just do, and then the second time, it apparently seemed to be potentially much more severe of an injury, because nobody really could give me any answers at that point. My wife too, and her being a nurse, she was concerned, and you just you pray, you trust, and that's a short answer to a very important question, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people think about the officers that was hurt, and that's definitely tragic. But also with like your wife, I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff and trauma that comes along with that as well.
Yeah, it was not her favorite morning for sure. Yeah, and she that's one of the things that in addition to the officers, man, it's a team effort. The spouses need as much support as the officers do, and for me, like I said, man, in comparison to other people who've been shot and stabbed and in horrible crashes, I came away pretty stinking okay. I had to have a back surgery and a fusion. Other people have lost limbs in their lives and have to be in a wheelchair for the rest of their life. So in comparison, I came out way on the upside here. But for when they notified my parents and then notified my wife, they don't have all the info at the time. So when you see somebody knocking on your door, you instantly go to, they're dead. So it was definitely a not her favorite morning. That's for sure.
Yeah. So just to close out with the most important question I could ask you guys is, why should someone follow Jesus?
Pastor Dad?
Why not? Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? I can't credit me with this philosophy here, but it's like, if you give your heart to Christ and you follow him, what do you got to lose? Because your life is going to be better. Your relationships are going to be better, and your marriage is going to be better, and your family is going to be better, and your work ethic is going to be better, and people maybe, for the most part, are going to like you more, And you might have greater opportunities to encourage others, be a friend to others, and then you've got the investment you've made has eternal dividends because you're going to be with the Lord forever. What do you got to lose? I mean, to me that is a no-brainer, but so many folks just they've never heard a clear word, or they've never seen the opportunity to have a clear understanding of what a Christian is, because they see so many other kinds of examples. Maybe, or we go into a church and think of that Mamas and Papas song. Went into a church and I knelt down to pray, and but they haven't been invited and loved on and cared for, and come to realize, wow, this is great to be here. It's the greatest decision I've ever made to turn to Christ, because it just gives eternal dividends, and you can pass it on to the rest of your family, so that one day all your kids and your grandkids, you can all see them again. Your husbands, your wives, your everybody. I mean, it doesn't get any better. Why would someone not? I think it's generally because they haven't seen the real deal. They haven't heard the real message. And you got to have both of those. And, preferably you've got the real deal that leads someone to hunger for the real word, and so they can respond to it. So what do you got to lose?
Yeah. Wow. That's good.
I think a halfway decent analogy for it is if, let's take MIT as an example. If your goal in life, your dream is to be a tenured professor at MIT, and you've tried to get in on staff, you've applied, you've got denied. And, you're thinking, man, I don't know if this is ever going to happen. And then a professor there, or maybe it's the head of the school, right, comes and says, hey, man, I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to show you the way. Follow my lead. Do what I do. Say what I say. And I can promise you, I can guarantee you that I'll get you a job and you'll become a tenured professor at MIT. If that's your goal, you'd be a fool to pass up that opportunity. But the beautiful part about it is that we have that for our life. There is a man who walked this earth, who was the perfect man, the perfect example. We have texts that show his life and his teachings in the instruction manual to get everything that you could have ever hoped for. Maybe it's not monetary, right? I'm not saying that, man, this prosperity gospel of follow Jesus and it's going to be easy. But I'm saying follow Jesus, it's going to be good. And so I don't know why anybody would choose to not do something that they were divinely created to do. Scripture says we're all created in his image. Now, whether you know that you're created in his image or not, you were. Everybody that is born is created in his image. And it's your choice if you want to follow the greatest human being, the greatest person in the one and only God. That's a decision that you're going to have to make. But as my dad had said previously, why not?
Yeah. I like that. I've never heard it explained that way, but yeah, I love the analogy that you use for that. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, and kind of on the vulnerability side, like I shared earlier, I've been a Christian. You could almost say my whole life, right? Born into the church. Dad is a pastor. Growing up, I've had a lot of great role models around me, and I'm so thankful for that. But, I can remember, I got into golf like a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And I say that I'm quite obsessed with it. Most of the way healthy obsessed. But, I really want to get better at it. Mm-hmm. I want to get better. And I can remember, watching people like Rory and Scotty and Justin Rose and all these guys, you're thinking, man, if I can do what they do, if I can just make my arms do what their arms do and swing the same speed as them, my game is going to get a lot better. And so, I had I asked my wife to go buy me a cheap mirror from the store so I could go and, watch what they're doing and then look at myself in the mirror and try and get in the right position. Cause I thought, man, if I could just put my body in that position and learn what that feels like and it mimics them, then that's going to help my game. And I remember being in my backyard and, I'm in the middle of this backswing, watching myself in this mirror and just feeling like this gut punch from the Lord. And it's like, clear as day, I could hear him say, why are you spending so much time trying to make yourself like somebody else who doesn't care about you when you're not spending enough time making yourself like me? You talk about like, good grief, man. And and how often do us as believers do that? Whether it's somebody that as a workout person or a workout person, like a fitness coach or a musician or a sports idol, you name it, insert it there. How much time are we trying to emulate other people more than we're emulating Christ? And so yeah, I think if we put as much time and focus on emulating Christ as we do other things in our life and other goals and focuses, everything that comes after that is going to be much better and much more fulfilling because we have our priorities on the right thing.
Wow. Man, I love the way you explained that. And talk about a gut punch. Yeah.
It was not fun.
Yeah.
And it was not a good feeling that day. And I'm not saying that you don't have goals and don't try to improve yourself and don't try to be better. My goodness, do it. Be better, work hard. Work hard at things that you love. But make sure that you work hard for Jesus too, and more so than others.
Man, that's good. Yeah, so Dave, I know you've been in the law enforcement community, state police. What would be a message that you would give to the leaders to better do their job, to be there for their people?
Look after your guys and your gals. Care for them. Have an open door. Just, a sheriff or a colonel can only do so much, but train up your staff under you to be sure that they're doing their job all the way down to the sergeant or the corporal, to be sure that they're doing their job to look after the whole person. Not just are they doing their job when they're here, but how are they doing? How's life? Those kinds of things. That's so important. I said earlier where the psychiatrist said, every person on earth could survive, in his estimation, if they knew that one other person cared for them. So take a few minutes and be a caring person, be a caring supervisor, be a caring sheriff, a caring colonel. Be there and let people know that, hey, we care about you here. You're not just a number, because it's so easy to feel like you're just a number. Hey, I'm just filling the slot. They don't care about me. I'm just a number. Well, who wants to work in that kind of condition? But so many, many people do. Law enforcement in all kinds of areas. So be a leader who serves others and cares for others.
No, I like that. And Tim, I kind of had a follow-on question about Honor the Blue. So what's the best way that we can help support Honor the Blue?
Sure. Like we talked about today, we provide gift cards and equipment and care. I wish there was an endless supply of resources to do that. But the fact of the matter is things take finances, things take time, things take volunteer efforts. So there's a host of different ways that people can support law enforcement and support Honor the Blue. You can visit honortheblue.us. There's a lot of information and ways to get in contact with us there. We have various events throughout the year where we need volunteers. If you're a person or a business that wants to support us financially, all the information is there. And it's we're a nonprofit. This is not for our gain. The stuff that we come in, over top of any of our operating costs goes right back out into the law enforcement community. So there's a lot of different ways. And if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. And we'd love to set up a time to chat and figure out the best way to get people involved.
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for coming on the show and just sharing all your wisdom and all those stories. I know that it'll truly bless one. So yeah, I appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much for having us and all that you're doing for the Lord and for the law enforcement community. It's really cool. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Amen. Lord bless you.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of Faith in the Line of Duty. If you're a first responder or in the military and have a story you'd like to share, email me at faithinthelineofduty@gmail.com. You could be a guest on a future episode. To continue the conversation, visit my Facebook and Instagram page. Thanks again for tuning in, and join me next time for another encouraging story of faith in the line of duty.